Good morning, good morning, good morning. It's so good to see everybody this morning. I want to welcome you to the 23rd annual public meeting on the long-term plan for achieving water quality goals in the Everglades protection area tributary basins. Very long name, but a very important meeting. This annual meeting is held annually to inform you, the stakeholders, of our progress in achieving good water quality inflows into the Everglades. Um, restoration and water quality improvements have been a important part of the district mission for over 50 years. But our efforts in this capacity were bolstered in 1994 when the Everglades Forever Act became law. This landmark legislation focused on the preservation of the ecology and hydrology of waters flowing into and activities within the Everglades protection areas. So in 2003, the Everglades Forever Act was revised, and we included the long-term plan, which is a comprehensive set of water quality measures. But that long-term plan was adopted with that revision. And then again, in 2013, there was another revision that expanded the long-term plan to include restoration strategies. All right, so today we're going to have a wide variety of topics to provide a comprehensive snapshot of our progress in achieving our water quality goals. Now, we're not going to field any questions in this forum, but at the end of every presentation, you'll see a contact page. So if you have questions or want more information on a specific topic, I encourage you to reach out to the presenter, or if you need to, you can reach out directly to me and I can make that connection. But we want to make sure you get as much information as you so desire from this meeting. Now, before I begin, I do want to kind of just orient you a little bit. The doors to the left lead to vending machines and restrooms in the cafeteria. We actually don't bring food in, but for your convenience, I want to make sure you're not, disoriented when nature calls. Our first presentation, I'm going to try to share with you the conditions under which the subsequent presentations operated over the last few years. So I'll be talking specifically about the system's conditions in this first presentation. Now, our regional water quality plan, the Restoration Strategies Water Quality Plan, is one of the primary platforms we use for our improvement efforts. The program involved significant construction to expand or improve the stormwater treatment areas, to create additional storage through the formation and creation of flow equalization basins and projects that improved on the conveyance. In this restoration strategies footprint, we have three flow paths. The eastern, just a second. The eastern flow path, the central flow path, and the western flow path. These are areas that were defined by the source basins that feed them, the eastern flow path in C51 basin, the central flow path in the Everglades agricultural area, and then the western flow path, the C139 basin. Now, for the purpose of this talk, when I talk about these basins, so that I don't get tongue-tied and you guys don't get confused, I'll just talk about the restoration strategies basins, or I'll call it the flow path basins. And to the north of the footprint, we have Lake Okeechobee, and to the east and south of our area of concentration, we have what we call the Everglades protection area, which includes conservation areas 1, conservation area 2, conservation area 3, and further down the system, the Everglades National Park. All right, as I mentioned, the plan included 13 projects, 13 construction projects that were to be completed over a 13-year period, and we've concluded the construction. So all of these projects are now completed. But these projects had a very strict schedule and milestone requirements that were governed by consent orders. So the district also identified and funded projects beyond the restoration strategies requirement. Those projects were used to further enhance and improve the water quality treatment capabilities. We call those projects specifically, we call those refurbishments. And we're not going to talk specifically about those in this forum, but it's just for your reference. All right, so rainfall in Florida. It ranges between 52 to 66 inches annually. And this graph is actually showing basin-weighted average monthly rainfall in the restoration strategies basins for a period of record from 1995 to 2026, a 30-year record. And while it looks like this on a calendar year, those data, we tend to talk about restoration strategies or our performance in terms of a water year. And so our water year runs literally from May 1st to April 30th. And it's partitioned into two seasons, a wet season and a dry season. Here we show the wet season, the wet season will be shaded in blue, and this will be kind of the theme throughout this talk. So we have the shaded in blue, and then the tan is the dry season, just typically shaded, again, they're shaded in tan. Our average rainfall during the wet season is about 40 inches, and the average rainfall in the dry season is about 13 inches. So keep that in mind as we kind of go through this next series of slides that's specific to this. All right, now this slide is a 3-day average rainfall for 3 water years, water year 24, 25, and a partial of 26, actually through the middle of January. Again, the blue is wet season, the tan is dry season. And what this slide shows is that, rain is constant throughout the year, but as you would imagine, it's most intense and most frequent in those areas that are shaded blue, and tend to be a little less intense in the areas that are shaded tan. We also have conditions, climatic conditions that we call extreme rain events or extreme events, and those are periods of that can produce large volumes of rain, create local runoff, or impact the stages of the systems that we operate in. Examples of extreme events might be hurricanes, warm, cold fronts, tropical activities, a nor'easter, sort of like what we're beginning to experience this week. But those activities, those meteorological activities can impact the localized rain, especially in the restoration strategies basins. 2024 water year and the early part of 2025, we actually have some prime examples of that type of impact. In water year 2024, in the dry season, we actually experienced several events that were anomalous by comparison, and they're kind of listed here. You may recall in last December, not just current December, but December of 23, we had a nor'easter that came through then, and that weather event actually dropped quite a bit of rain in our region. Um, the wet year, the following water year, in June of '24, we had another record-breaking event. It was the third wettest day that was on record, that June 12th event. And I'll bring attention to this event because you'll actually see a signature in some of the preceding presentations. All right, so the next slides are going to deal specifically with the seasonal the rainfall within the system. You'll see all the slides are very similar. You'll see a map on the left. That map is the total conditions for the water year in the district footprint, but I actually highlighted the restoration strategies basins in that red polygon that sits here. This would include the C51, the Everglades agriculture area, and the C139 basins. From this slide, we can see that for the most part, the water year 24, we had normal rains. We had throughout the system, we had about 103% of normal that year. And it actually reflects when we break that out into the monthly rainfall through that year. The graph here to the left shows the basin average. The axis on the right shows the rainfall, and then the axis on below shows the actual month. In 2024, we had a normal wet season. We had a surplus at the end of that wet season of about 2.5 inches. The dry season also was normal, about 98% of normal. And even in that, we had a small deficit of about a half-inch deficit. And just for your reference, this dotted line is just the long-term average that I showed in that previous slide. In water year 2025, the similar layout, but you'll notice that we have much drier conditions in our area of concentration or areas of interest. Certainly a normal wet year, above average, 120% of normal, but a much lower dry season at 57% of normal. Also resulted in almost an 8.5-inch deficit during the dry season. I will bring up once again that June 12th event. This represented by this bar that was considered the third wettest day on record, but actually in the C139 basement, it was the #1 wettest day ever on record. And now we look at our current water year as we progress through mid-January. Again, very dry conditions. We are in the heart of a drought, but we had a very normal wet season, 102% of normal. Surprisingly, with about almost a 1-inch surplus, despite dry conditions that are currently persistent. During our dry season, it's a different story. Much below average, at 37% of normal to date, and we're currently kind of sitting within about almost a 5-inch deficit currently. All right, so these next slides, we're just going to kind of explore the rainfall that I just talked about and the inflows to the STAs. So in this graph, you'll see the total inflows a table to the left of the graph, but we'll have this top graph that shows the total inflows, and it's partitioned out as lake release and runoff in blue. The lake release in yellow, runoff in blue, and the bottom graph actually shows the rainfall. And this is all basin rainfall, so it's specific to our areas. And basically what you see here, I'll just bring it to your attention now because it's kind of the elephant in the room. In our current year, we have the lowest inflows that we have on record since we started operating all of the SDAs. Basically, the story, more water, generally more runoff. Although runoff or rains are actually just one small component of those total inflows. So we have other factors that also impact runoff. But in general, more rain, more water. More runoff. With regard to lake releases, the lake releases is that volume of water that we send to the send to the SDAs to kind of help with regulating the stages in Lake Okeechobee. And you'll notice that in water year 2025, we have a more important component of the total inflows, and part of that is due to the June 12th rains, as well as our efforts in trying to help with the lake recovery efforts. And if you look at that same story on a seasonal scale, in this case, the yellow is dry season inflows, and the blue are the wet season inflows. And in terms of rainfall, the orange is the dry season, and the green is the wet season. We see, again, in general, we had a normal wet season, and we got the lion's share of our inflows that was produced as a result of that. The 2024 year was a bit of a wet year, as I showed, and so we tend to have more water in that year, and especially during the dry season, you'll see a slight difference in the dry season inflows. But in essence, it boils down to we treat about a million gallons. 1.5 acre feet of inflows. I won't say on average, but in 2024 we had about 1.5 million acre feet, 1.2 in 2025. But again, we are record low in our current water year. In essence, more rain in general, you tend to just kind of have a little more more water for our SDAs to treat. I think that's right. So that just sort of gives you the flavor of the conditions under which the subsequent presentations will be presented. Wet year 24, and then of course we've been in a much below average dry seasons for the subsequent 2 years later. All right. With that, we're going to move into looking at the stormwater treatment area's performance, and so I'm going to yield to Jessica Jensen and Mike Breslin to present.
Thank you, Robert. Good morning. My name is Jessica Jennison. I will be presenting the Everglades Stormwater Treatment Area Performance Update. So we will go through each of the 5 STAs, starting in the eastern flow path, and then moving into the central flow path, and then onto the western flow path. So we will cover the volumes and the total phosphorus loads and the flow weighted mean concentration on a seasonal and monthly basis, or yearly and monthly basis. Again, the data will be presented in water year, which is May 1st through April 30th. And then we will also go over the construction and operational restrictions for each STA. All STAs will be presented in the same format. So starting with STA 1 East, which is in the eastern flow path. All of the cells, so the STA 1 East cells are broken into flowways. So there's flow path, which is the system-wide flow path. So there's a whole eastern path in the system. And then the STAs are broken into cells even further. So STA 1 East has the eastern flowway, a central flowway, and a western flowway. And then looking at the graph to the right, these orange bars are the inflow TP flow weighted mean concentrations, so what's coming into the STA, and then the blue is the outflow TP flow weighted mean concentration. So this color scheme will remain consistent throughout the presentation. Inflow is orange and outflow is blue. So looking at STA 1 East, water year 26 to date, you can see that the inflow TP concentration for water year 26 is lower than 25. However, it is very close to water year 24. But the outflow TP concentration is lower than both water year 24 and 25. And then looking at the chart below, the inflow volume is in 1,000 acre feet. So the inflow volume for water year 26 so far is 43,000 acre feet, which is much lower than water year 24 and 25. But the TP load, inflow and outflow, and the TP flow weighted mean concentration % reduction is similar to the previous years. Now, looking at STA 1 East monthly inflows and outflows, you can see that, again, the color scheme is the same. So orange is inflow, blue is outflow. And the graph shows the monthly data starting from water year 24 through half of water year 26. The monthly inflow and outflow volumes are shown in the top graph here. And then the TP load is in the middle. And then the bottom is the total flow weighted mean concentration, total phosphorus flow weighted mean concentration. And then these breaks here are periods of no flow. So water year 26 to date, the inflow volume is again well below water year 25 and 24. And then you'll notice this spike. This is that June event that Robert was talking about. And this heavy rain event affected each STA a little bit differently. For operational restrictions in STA 1 East, the central flowway was offline and is still offline for construction activities. We are currently leveling the central flowway to improve the topography, which will set ideal vegetation grow-in conditions. And then the western flowway is online with restrictions for vegetation grow-in. You can see there's some planters down here, and that's to fix a short circuit happening in that STA. Moving on to STA 1S West, which is also in the eastern flow path. The cells are separated into the eastern flowway, and then the northern flowway, and a western flowway. Looking at the graph, water year 26 to date, inflow and outflow TP concentration is lower than water year 25, but nearly the same as water year 24. And then looking at the table, again, the inflow volume at 59,000 acre feet is much lower than the previous 2 years. And then the TP load inflow and outflow and TP flow weighted mean concentration percent reduction are similar to previous years. Now looking at the monthly inflows. Inflows volumes, again, are lower in water year 24 and 25. And there's also a downward trend in the monthly inflow and outflow TP flow weighted mean concentration. And there's that June spike again. For restrictions in the STA1 West, the eastern flowway was online with restrictions for culvert replacements. It was also offline for vegetation management activities. And there were periodic restrictions in most flowways for vegetation management activities, as well as black-necked stilt nesting in the eastern flowway and cells 6, 7, and 8. All right, moving on to STA2. STA2 is in the central flow path, and it is broken into 5 flowways. So there's flowway 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 down here at the bottom. Looking at the graph, STA2 water year 26 to date, inflow TP concentration is lower than water year 25, but the same as water year 24. Sorry, it is higher than water year 24. I was looking at the outflow. And so the outflow concentrations for water year 26 so far are lower than water year 25 and the same as water year 24. And then again, looking at the chart, the inflow volume at 134,000 acre feet is substantially lower than the previous 2 years. And then the TP inflow and TP flow weighted mean concentration percent reduction are similar to the 2 previous years. Looking at the monthly data for STA2, here you see that June event again, and this really affected STA2's annual inflow. As you can see for this middle chart here, that outflow volume was really hard to get down with that June event. But getting back to water year 2026. So again, looking at STA2 monthly data, like STA1 East and 1 West, there are lower monthly inflow volumes compared to the previous years. But we are seeing a downward trend in the outflow concentrations. For operational restrictions, Flowway 3 was offline for an SAV recovery drawdown. You'll have an opportunity to hear about this project later today in this meeting. And then there were periodic restrictions in all flowways for inflow canal dredging, and then vegetation management activities and black-necked stilt nesting. All right, moving on to STA 3-4, also in the central flow path. STA 3-4 is separated into 3 flowways. There's the eastern flowway, the central flowway, and the western flowway. And then looking at the graph, you can see that the inflow and outflow TP concentration is lower than both water year 24 and 25. So both inflow and both outflow TP concentrations are lower this year than they have been in the previous 2 years. And again, consistent message that the inflow volumes are much lower than the previous 2 years. And the TP load inflow and outflow and TP flow weighted mean concentration percent reduction is similar to the previous years. Looking at the monthly data for STA 3-4, while the monthly inflow TP flow weighted mean concentrations are variable, with a lot of these little spikes happening throughout the last 2 water years, there is still a downward trend. And here there was no inflow for November and December, and this was due to just not really moving water through the system. For restrictions, the eastern flowway was online with restrictions for vegetation grow-in, and the western flowway had some restrictions for a prescribed fire we were able to implement for operational management study, and you will be able to hear more of this later today in this presentation as well. All right, on to STA 5-6, our lonely STA in the western flow path. So for water year 26 to date, the inflow TP concentration is lower than water year 24 and 25. However, water year 26 outflow concentration right here is higher than the previous 2 years. This is due to a post-dryout rehydration TP spike that occurred last summer. STA 5-6 frequently has areas of dryout, and you will be able to see those dryouts better in the next slide. But really quick, looking at this table, again, at 53,000 acre feet going into STA 5-6, it is much lower than the previous 2 years. And then the TP load inflow and outflow and the TP flow weight to mean concentration load percent reduction is lower than previous years. So here you can see all of these breaks. These show where there was dryout in STA 5-6. You can also see that June event again. So after it was dry and then rehydrated and then started moving water through the system, we get these spikes in the total phosphorus. And it can often be really hard to recover from, as we saw in STA 2. And again, we'll see it in STA 5-6. So here in October for this water year 2026, we had a similar situation where the STA had dried out, then it was rehydrated, we started moving water through the system, and we see this high TP spike. So, but fortunately, after October spike, the inflow concentrations are trending downward, which is important to reduce our outflow TP for STA 5-6. And we also now have the A1 FEB. STA 5-6 is not quite as lonely as it used to be. So there were no operational restrictions. And then again, C139 FEB became operational in June 2025. There was some online testing for that FEB in the wet season, so we haven't been able to realize the benefits of this yet. And then to wrap up all of the STAs, in summary, the STA inflow volumes for the last 8 months for water year 2026 are very low compared to previous years. As Robert mentioned, the wet season had a normal rainfall, but the dry season has had lower rainfall than normal. But we are showing a downward trend in water year 26 for inflow and outflow TP concentrations for STA 1 East, 1 West, STA 2, and STA 3-4 compared to the previous 2 years. And the STA 5-6 outflow TP concentration so far in water year 26 is elevated, but that's due to a post-dryout rehydration TP spike that occurred last summer. And the C139 FEB will help the frequency and duration of dryouts in STA 5-6. If you have any further inquiries, feel free to reach out to me or Mike.
Thank you, Jessica. Good job, well done. All right, so our next presentation, we've heard about the STAs and their ability to take up phosphorus, and that's the activity of those STAs is contingent on in a sense, the biology of the system. And so this next presentation we'll have from Mr. Jake Thayer deals with the STA vegetation management and the enhancements of that system. All right, Jake?
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Jake Thayer. I'm an STA wetland scientist. I work with the STA vegetation group, and I'll be giving our update here on STA vegetation management and enhancement. So, highly productive marsh ecosystems change over time, often in unpredictable ways, and they are moving toward a more stable state. This progression over time is called succession. In stormwater treatment areas, this inevitable process leads to natural colonization of marsh species, which is good, but over time, succession in the STAs can lead to muck accumulation and woody vegetation encroachment. To keep these constructed marsh ecosystems best suited for nutrient uptake, active vegetation management is needed. This means reducing invasive plants to the lowest feasible levels, managing problematic native plants when determined necessary, and actively increasing the abundance of desirable vegetation. Here in this picture, we see invasive floating vegetation threatening some of our planted areas. These invasive floating plants grow exponentially. They can form tussocks very quickly and physically remove our desired emergent vegetation. They can also pretty quickly shade out our submerged plant beds. The goal of STA vegetation management is to establish and sustain a stable marsh community that maintains effective nutrient removal over time. So what does an effective STA marsh look like? Well, we start with the soils. An effective STA marsh will have stable soils that are consolidated, often mineral, and negatively buoyant. The water is shallow, sheet flow that moves evenly across the marsh without forming channelized flow. In the vegetation, we've learned over time, an effective marsh will have diverse vegetation, both in species and structure. So structure meaning both immersed and submergent plants. Together, these characteristics provide optimal condition for long-term biological nutrient uptake. Now, conversely, an ineffective STA marsh is characterized by unconsolidated, flocculent, oftentimes buoyant sediments. These sediments, together with the associated vegetation, can separate from the substrate, forming floating tussocks, sometimes several acres in size. We call this delamination. And delamination can affect a large portion of the cells, creating highly unstable conditions. Water then flows beneath this vegetation, effectively bypassing treatment within the marsh. In addition, these floating islands and their associated degraded vegetation can readily be moved with wind and water currents, causing physical disturbance to the desirable vegetation. These unstable sediments are also easily scoured by water flow, causing preferential flow paths that we call short circuits that further bypass the vegetated areas and result in ineffective biological nutrient removal. Another characteristic of an ineffective STA marsh is low plant diversity. With low plant diversity, this fails to support the full suite of biological processes that are necessary for stable and efficient nutrient removal over time. For example, a robust microbial community, well-developed nutrient cycling, and structural support for algae and bacteria. The process of vegetation management really consists of regular monitoring of our vegetation health. With more than 100,000 acres of STAs, including many remote and difficult to access areas, aerial surveys are one of our most effective tools. This allows us to quickly identify emerging issues across the landscape. For example, when we detect invasive vegetation, we can proactively manage the problem before it spreads. We also can find where SAV is lacking, or submerged aquatic vegetation, and we actively reestablish native SAV plant communities through inoculation in the inflows, allowing those propagules to essentially move through the vegetation and find a foothold in open areas. Areas impacted by invasive vegetation or water scouring, i.e. the short circuits, are repaired and to restore function and maintain proper treatment performance. In addition, areas affected by this water scouring, we can install physical barriers to slow the water movement and stabilize the area, giving vegetation the opportunity to naturally recover or recover through planting operations. The physical barriers we use are called marsh fences. That's the trade name. They are mesh canvas material. They do not inhibit water flow, but they just slow the water, act kind of as a proxy for a vegetation strip, and they allow for we install them perpendicular to water flow, and once installed, they slow the water and allow us to reduce that area from additional water scouring and create sheltered areas for us to replant or for the vegetation to colonize naturally. If a short circuit is left unmanaged, it can form a fairly deep river and moving sediment downstream. This picture here behind the lettering is an area in STA 1 East that the short circuit formed naturally as water finds the path of least resistance and deposited a lot of those sediments into the outflow canal. This short circuit was too deep to replant, and too deep for the marsh fences. So it kind of limits our options. And that brings me to this year. What we had to do in that case was we had to dewater the cell and had a large scale regrading operation, meaning bringing in a whole bunch of heavy equipment and laser leveling the cell to where we can have a more effective treatment marsh. So this past year, cells 3 and 4 north of STA1 east, central flowway, were dewatered and underwent a whole cell regrading operation. Following substantial completion of the cell 3, water was reintroduced to the cell. Since rehydration, early colonizing species very quickly took foothold. For example, a lot of native species like cattail, cara, and Sagittarius species have naturally recruited. Unfortunately, at the same time, several invasive species, for example, Ludwigia species, water hyacinth, and crested floating heart, have also colonized the cell. Management efforts are underway to control these invasive species to prevent their spread and prevent them from becoming a dominant species in these areas. We want to set ourselves up for success as we replant this cell. So other things in the STA1 East. Over the past year, while the central flowway was offline, we took an opportunity to replant scoured areas in cell 4 north, which is right below cells 3 and 4, which were dewatered. All open areas in cell 5 were replanted to limit space available for invasive vegetation that are already well established in that cell. That cell has significant invasive species presence, and so we're trying to fight that with competition as well as management interventions. Cell 6 received supplemental plantings to maintain sheet flow across the marsh, and cell 7 underwent substantial plantings to replace a large short circuit in that cell. Invasive plant management is constant in all these cells, but those are the big ones. In STA1 West, the eastern flowway is undergoing large refurbishment through mechanical shredding of dense floating vegetation, that delaminated vegetation I mentioned earlier, that do not contribute to stormwater treatment. This work is in preparation for large-scale replanting, which is underway. Planned culverts replacement in cell 3 have been postponed. In cell 8, marsh fences have been installed to help stabilize conditions to support a large-scale replanting effort. In STA1 West Expansion 2, plantings continue in all cells. We're also removing Carolina willow from cell 11 in Expansion 2 to promote establishment of a stable marsh community that's essential for effective nutrient removal. Woody vegetation is a symptom of succession. It's a natural process, but unfortunately they do not provide effective control or effective nutrient removal. We're looking for more herbaceous plants. So here's a video of the shredding operation in the eastern flowway. So we employed this machine that emulsifies the vegetation and creates a path for us to go behind and plant. So we provided this operator with GIS tracks for planting lines that were ideally going to compartmentalize the cell and hopefully have a more stable condition. All the vegetation you see there is all delaminated. It's affected by water flow and moved around with the wind. So he went and made several passes in both a few cells out there. So moving down south to STA2, built up silt was dredged from the inflow of cell 1 and deposited into the northeast corner of the cell. Marsh fences were installed in cells 2 and 3 to mitigate short circuiting and improve water distribution. Cell 3 endured a planned drawdown to promote establishment of desired vegetation. I think you'll hear about that more in a subsequent presentation. In cell 5, the vegetation strip near the inflow was repaired with new plantings. Across all cells, submerged aquatic vegetation was distributed to help establish a mixed marsh community in the form of Illinois pondweed. Okay, moving across the street to SDA 3-4. Marsh fences were installed in 3B to improve water distribution and overall performance. We also conducted prescribed burn in a cattail-dominated area to better understand how the marsh responds to fire and how we can use this as a management tool in the future. That will also be in a subsequent presentation. In addition, we carried out selective cattail reduction to create habitat for SAV. Using drone imagery, we are tracking the response of both emergent and submergent vegetation to this selective cattail treatment management tactic. Okay, moving over out west to the C139 FEB, it was recently hydrated. Our bulrush plantings seem to be establishing nicely. Unfortunately, the highly invasive West Indian marsh grass has also taken a foothold throughout the FEB, and we are undergoing management for that plant. However, management for West Indian marsh grass is challenging and often unsuccessful. Invasive floating vegetation is prolific out there. We are constantly monitoring and managing floating plants wherever we find them. Hydrilla has been observed in the northeast corner of the cell, and we're just monitoring at this time. No treatments are planned. Okay, moving to STA inflows. So this past year, there has been increased effort by our field station staff to eliminate invasive vegetation upstream of the STAs. This work requires persistent, ongoing monitoring and repeated management actions. Managing invasive plants in canals is significantly easier and more straightforward than the STAs because treatments can be applied more broadly. In contrast, management in STA marshes must be more selective to protect our desirable native plant communities that support treatment performance. Okay, that was a lot of information really fast, but essentially we have developed a comprehensive and aggressive vegetation refurbishment strategy to support our water quality goals. Each cell was evaluated and assigned a timeline tailored to specific needs. Depending on identified needs, that plan may include plantings, installation of physical barriers, and or selective aerial management of invasive plants. To ensure we stay on track, we continuously monitor all cells to adjust our timelines and actions as conditions change. That's really the most important part about vegetation management is staying on top of things with persistence and constant monitoring. Now, for more complex challenges, we implement specialized management approaches. One example is the issue of vegetation and underlying soils becoming buoyant and separating from the marsh bottom, that delamination process, which is a widespread problem in parts of our STAs. To address this, we've recently begun that mechanical shredding that we saw earlier of the floating mats to help restore stable conditions. We are also advancing new strategies to support submerged aquatic vegetation. These include designing planting layouts within cells that function as nursery areas, directly introducing the cells with harvested SAV, and selectively thinning cattails to create open habitat that encourage the establishment of underwater plant beds. So I'll just expand on that just a little bit. So in our STAs, maintaining vegetation balance in the mixed marsh ecosystem is challenging because again, these marshes are constantly changing over time. So our goal, emergent vegetation is necessary in the STAs. They establish sediments or stabilize sediments, reduce water movement, and support our submerged plants. Cattail is very beneficial for that. However, we can have too much of a good thing, and over time, emergent vegetation, especially cattail, can become dominant and too dense and crowd out submerged plants. In the mixed marsh area, these cells are all generally one depth, so you do not have that morphology that supports the different sections of plants, so it's very easy for cattail to become a monoculture out there, and that reduces overall STA performance. In those cases, we've selectively controlled the cattail with herbicide to restore a mixed marsh condition. These photos show areas that were originally SAV, became dominant with dense cattail, and now due to our management efforts have again supported submerged aquatic vegetation. So with that concludes my update. Sure thing.
we've covered a lot of territory already. You know, with the,
You're not showing online the
Pardon?
presentation. Rory came and told me it's not. When they click on the link, nobody can see it outside this room. Just
Oh.
giving you a heads up.
okay, I'll work on that after this next presentation. Uh, Pardon? Yeah. Okay. All right, stand by. Let's see what we got. Please stand by. Okay, I'll ask this. I have a question. Rory, did you say that others couldn't see? They couldn't see the presentation?
Yeah, sorry. So when I went to the link on the calendar invite.
That was a placeholder. It should have been directly on the portal into, yeah. Yeah, it's a Zoom link. Okay. All right. All right. We'll work on that afterwards, but a lot of information has been presented. We've covered performance. We've actually covered the vegetation activity that helps us to facilitate that. And keep in mind, I didn't mention this, and I should have. You know, we're dealing with 640,000 acres of treatment areas. So we are talking about a massive. We're talking about 100 square miles, pretty much, of treatment facilities. So these efforts that are being presented aren't small by any sense of the imagination. So we thank you for all the hard work. This next presentation deals specifically with some of the management activities that were briefly mentioned. And I think we have a personnel change. The next presentation will be presented by Sarah Barnhoff and Camille Hurto. They'll deal with the applied sciences and adaptive management of the Everglades stormwater treatment areas. And with that, I will share the podium with Sarah. In the meantime, I'm going to see if I can figure out what's going on.
I think we're okay. But let's see. Hey, Robert, how do you do the pointer?
Where's your control? Control L.
Okay, great. Good morning, everybody. Yes, I am not Matt Powers. He is having some transportation issues this morning, so I'm going to step in from him. I will try my best to be as eloquent with his science as he would be, and then Camille will be following up with her part of the presentation. So I'm going to start with a quick overview at first, and then I'm going to dive into his portion of the presentation. Okay, so the stormwater treatment areas are comprised of 5 treatment wetlands constructed to reduce phosphorus concentrations. The STAs combined have reduced phosphorus loads by 77% and achieved an average outflow total phosphorus concentration of 30 micrograms per liter. The STAs must meet water quality-based effluent limit requirements. And as you saw from Jess Jennison's presentation, the STAs are working really well, but there's still room for improvement and optimization. So normally at this meeting, we present about our work on the Restoration Strategies Science Plan, but that plan was completed in 2024. We completed 21 studies evaluating the hydraulic, physical, chemical, and biological processes that affect total phosphorus concentration discharges from the STAs. So from all of that work, we took the results and we developed 20 potential management strategies to improve phosphorus retention in each of the STA flowways. So from these management strategies and looking at our STAs, we, over the last year and a half or so, developed 2 adaptive management studies implemented to restore and optimize both vegetation and improve STA performance. So the two studies we're going to talk about today, the first is Fire as a Management Tool Study. That's the one that Matt Powers was going to cover that I will cover instead. And then Camille will follow with the STA Recovery Drawdown Study. Okay, so these are the study locations. On the right-hand side of the map, we have STA2 Cell 3, which is where the SAV Recovery Drawdown took place. So this STA had a very good performance history until about, I think it was like 10 years ago. Its performance started to decline, which also coincided with a loss of submerged aquatic vegetation. Camille will go into that a little bit more, but for this study, for the Fire as a Tool Study, it was done in STA 3-4 in the Western Flowway Cell 3B. It has historically been an amazing performer, and it still is. It's our showstopper. It always does a great job. Having said that, there have been some changes throughout the cell that I will detail, as well as a few erratic data points that made us kind of take a look at it and decided to implement this study. Okay, so evaluation of fire as a management tool in the STAs. Okay, STAs are designed as a mix of EAV and SAV, with a greater proportion of EAV at the inflow and a higher proportion of SAV at the outflow is optimal for performance. Cattail can outcompete those SAV areas in the outflow, reducing their coverage, and it can lead to decreased performance. I think in Jake's presentation, it was actually a little good segue because he talked a little bit about some of the management that goes into reducing the cattail and the outflow of these areas. And you can see this is a picture from STA 3-4 Cell 3B. Not only do we have like a massively dense live cattail stand here, but you can see that, I mean, this is a picture of one of our staff members, and he's like a good normal 6 foot something tall, and that just shows you how much standing biomass this is. And we know from our previous restoration strategies science that this can be a problem for many reasons, not only outcompeting the SAV, but shading the water column, impeding flow. There's lots of reasons why this can be an issue, especially in the back end of an SAV. So there's been a lot of prior research on prescribed fire, herbicide, the combination of both, and it shows that we can reduce cattail coverage. However, the effects are not 100% known for areas like the STAs where it's very, very dense cattail. I think it's something like, compared to the conservation areas where a lot of this research was done, I think we can have like 4 times the amount of biomass in the same area as that would be in the conservation areas. Okay, so the study objectives for this study were to measure the effects of prescribed fire, herbicide application, and then the combined effect of both. So we wanted to look at short-term water quality because previous research has shown that there will be a phosphorus spike. And since these are operating STA flowways, we have to make sure we don't release any poor water quality. So that's of interest. And then as well as the long-term water quality changes and long-term vegetation changes. So that's going to really show us the effectiveness of the treatment. So then we're going to take these results and hopefully help develop and fine-tune management strategies depending on the area that we want to look at, because some of these strategies might be better at the inflow, some of them might be better at the outflow. For this particular study, one of our main goals was to promote that SAV at the outflow, so we really want to open up areas and retain them for long periods of time. Here is our experimental design. It was a 2x2 factorial design with herbicide application and burning as our 2 main treatments. Then we also had the combined factor of herbiciding and then burning together, as well as our untreated or controlled plots. You can see the plots here in cell 3B were located at the top of the flowway. So this is still pretty well situated in the low P domain, around 20 to 30 parts per billion, and they're all equidistantly spaced down the flowway so that they're receiving the same water quality approximately coming from the inflow of the cell. Each plot's about 2 hectares, so which is like 5 acres. So you can see it's a very small portion of the overall cell though. Each treatment was replicated 3 times, equaling about a total of 12 plots. So we collected surface water grabs more intensively at the beginning because we wanted to be able to capture that spike. Once we got past that initial short-term sampling, we have been now sampling bi-weekly, and we're going to continue that for 2 years. And you can see this first picture is our water quality sampling crew. We've got our peristaltic pump and sampling equipment there for sampling in the marsh. We also did physiochemical monitoring with deployed sondes, which is the center picture. That's a tripod we hang the sonde from. We do pH, temperature specific conductivity, and that is with sondes and continuous probes. We also did multiple vegetation monitoring methods, including ground surveys, that's actually just right there, that tiny little person with a quadrat in the massive stand of cattail. So we did actual physical ground surveys and biomass collection, as well as drone surveys, which prove very helpful for this study, and you'll see that data in a little bit. Okay, so this is more of the, okay, let's get started, let's get our herbicide going, let's get our bird going. And this is where our vegetation management and land resources group came in and did the heavy lift. So you can see this first picture is an untreated cattail stand, and this is at 6 weeks after treatment. So we did this ahead of the time that we wanted to burn to make sure the cattail had a really good chance of browning out. This was applied January 13th, 2025, and we used Amazamox, which is a cattail selective herbicide. Okay, so there was a ton of work that went into the burn preparation, and as non-burning scientists, this was all very new to us, and so we were so thankful to have such a great supportive team with vegetation management and our burn boss. So one of the first things we had to do was to create fire breaks, which were pretty much just driving airboats around our plots that were 3 airboats wide, and this is very thick cattail, so it was a ton of effort to get those breaks put in, but that's so that the burn stayed right where we wanted it. Veg management also had to do a burn plan, which included safety, the ground approach, or the approach that they were going to burn, which we did ground. You can also do it by helicopter, but that we lit this fire by airboat. We also had to look at infrastructure, boat ramps, how many ins and outs do we have to make sure that we safely can get out if the fire jumps or gets out of control. So you do all this planning, and then you have to sit and wait, because there's all these different situations that need to perfectly align to have this Goldilocks situation to be able to burn. The first one was the water level in the cell. We wanted it to be as low as possible so we could burn as much of the biomass as possible, but we're also accessing via airboat, so we do need still some water to be able to get around safely. We also had to look at the drought index, weather conditions, wind conditions. A little bit of wind is nice to be able to help carry the fire, but you can't have too much wind. And then any sort of local specific conditions that were relevant to the time. So wait for them. When we bugging, when are we gonna get to burn? And we finally got to burn, and I don't know how to start this. It should just go. Oh, can't do it with that, sorry. Okay, well, I'm gonna keep talking as Robert helps fix. Yes, there you go, perfect. Okay, so here is a video of the actual burn day. You can see those fire breaks I talked about, how wide they are, and they were running the airboats up and down them to make sure they stayed wet so the fire didn't break. Lots of airboats were out that day for safety to make sure the crew was where they needed to be. It's pretty interesting because you can see the part of the plot that's closest to us is very green because that was a burn-only plot, and you can see that it's not burning as well as the far plot, which was one that had the herbicide applied first. So you can see how well it burned. Another efficiency thing we did was we bunched our fire treatments so that instead of having what would it have been, like 6 individual plots to burn, we only had to burn across 3 larger plots, so that it was made it more efficient, and we were able to run the fire a lot better that way. And it was a huge long day, but it was very successful, and they did a great job, and our crew was waiting in the wings for as soon as a plot would finish burn, we would go in once the safety all clear was given, and we were able to do our water quality sampling. Straight. Okay. All right, so the short-term water quality effects. We knew that there was going to be a total phosphorus spike, and you can see it from this graph. So the y-axis is total phosphorus, and the x-axis is the days since burn. The red and orange dots here on the graph. Oh, now my pointer, I don't have it. Here we go. I think I got it. Ah, look at me. I got it. Thanks. So these 2 points are the immediately post-burn points, and you can see how high it was. Over 400 micrograms per liter. It was a pretty large spike, but you can see how quickly that did drop out. And by day 6 or so, there was really no statistically significant difference from the burn and burn plots from the other control and non-burn plots. And to dig into that a little further, if you break it up by the types of phosphorus, so on the left-hand panel, we have particulate phosphorus. We have in the middle panel, soluble reactive phosphorus, and on the right-hand panel, the dissolved organic phosphorus. And you can see the one that mainly contributed to that large spike was the particulate phosphorus, which was most likely in the form of ash, and it settled out really, really quickly. Small, tiny little spike in SRP, but that was quickly absorbed into biota, and really probably not even a statistically significant difference in the dissolved organic phosphorus. So this is really good for short-term water quality, as we don't want to export any phosphorus associated with the fire. So it dissipates really quickly, which was really great to see. Okay, so getting into the vegetation changes that we saw. So this vegetative coverage data came from the monthly drone surveys. And then from that imagery, we used supervised classification in ArcGIS Pro to create percent coverage of 4 different categories. The dark brown is dead cattail. And then the orange color is live cattail. The yellow is other vegetation, and then the light blue is open water. And it's reported as percent cover, so that the combined total of all 4 coverages equals 100%. And then across the x-axis is the month of sampling. So to start with the first panel, which is the untreated, our control plots, you can see there's like a little bit of variability in the vegetation coverages, but in general, they don't really change throughout the short-term monitoring of this study. For the herbicide plot, makes a lot of sense. You spray it, the percentage of cattail dead, the dark brown, shoots up, and it displaces the live cattail that's dying. The open water area really doesn't change all that much. For the burn-only plot, you can see that once the burn happens, the portion of dead cattail significantly decreases, because that's the dead standing biomass that was burned up. But you do see this increase in the proportion of live cattail as the live cattail starts growing back in, as well as an increase in this yellow area, which is the other vegetation, because there's room for it to kind of come in and start growing as well. And then to note, the open water area doesn't really change all that much with the burn only. When you look at the combination of the herbicide first and then the burn, you can see, similar to the herbicide plot, you see that increase in dead cattail after the application of the herbicide. But then once the burn happens, you see this dramatic drop, because we were able to burn up a ton of biomass. And the best part of it is it stays open. So we have all this light blue area is retaining that open area, which hopefully at some point will get colonized with SAV. Okay, so this is the slide I'm most likely to mess up. Okay, so post-treatment effects. Like I said, this is gonna be a 2-year study. We're only hitting about a year of sample collection. So some of the lingering questions we have are, how will treatments affect long-term water quality, and what are the processes responsible for those effects? What are the long-term vegetation effects? So hopefully this time next year, we'll have all those answers and we can present that data. But as a little teaser, this is some of the long-term data we've collected. So this graph is total phosphorus, deviation from the daily mean for each of the treatments. So what that means is, for every sampling day that we're out there, a daily mean of total phosphorus water quality coming out of those treatment plots is averaged. And then it's compared to the individual daily mean for each of the treatments. So in basic terms, if you are running above that 0 phosphorus mark here right in the center, that means your daily mean is going to be higher than the daily mean from all the other treatments. And if you're running lower, your daily mean is lower. All that means is, if you're above that, you're probably performing a little worse. So if you look at this, the herbicide and untreated are slightly above that deviation from the daily mean, meaning that their
their daily means are higher. But the burn and the burn herbicide are slightly lower than zero, meaning they might actually be performing a little bit better long term. Sorry, Matt. Okay, so our overall findings are that prescribed burning will release a large pulse of nutrients into the water column, but it's super short-lived, and when it comes to operations, we would really only need to have a flowway offline for probably a maximum of a few weeks. Burning alone will remove dead vegetation and litter, but if you do not apply herbicide first, that live cattail will recover quickly, which could be really helpful in certain areas, like perhaps the inflow of an STA where you want to get rid of the standing biomass, but you want that cattail to respond really quickly and do what it does really good there and providing phosphorus removal. Herbicide alone will kill cattail, but it will not create those open areas because that standing biomass is still going to be there. That doesn't mean it's not a good treatment. There still could be opportunities, like if it's too dry and we can't do a burn, but we still want to open areas up. It might take longer because that standing biomass has to degrade, but it still could be a really good management option. But the best one for creating open areas quickly and retaining those open areas is that herbicide burn combination. It worked really well. So just the management strategies takeaway, again, that combo of herbicide, letting it dry up, then running a fire if it worked the best to open up those areas to promote SAV growth. And then additionally, the dry season really is a great time to do this because we did have that high spike in phosphorus. We don't have the same push to be moving water through the STAs in the dry season, so it gives us that pause to be able to do the fire, let the pulse go down, and then resume normal operations. With that, email Matt for any questions. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Sarah/Matt. Great job. So this next presentation is Camille Hurto. She's going to expand on the management capacities or the management activities. And the title of her presentation is Submerged Aquatic Vegetation Recovery, Cell 2, STA 2, Cell 3.
All right. Thank you, Robert.
Sure.
Okay. So quickly before I begin, I just wanted to kind of get you guys reoriented since we're switching locations now. So Sarah just talked about the fire study that took place in 343B. We're now moving across the street to STA 2 Cell 3, which is located kind of right in the middle of the STA here. So we've seen submerged aquatic vegetation decrease significantly in STA 2 Cell 3 in recent years. So the initial decline was due to Hurricane Irma, but we have yet to see the SAV return back to pre-hurricane levels, and this is likely impacting cell performance. So in this figure here, you can see that the SAV frequency of occurrence is represented by these blue bars that's shown over time with higher frequency of occurrence values, meaning that SAV is present at more sites throughout the cell. And then this red line represents the cell's outflow total phosphorus concentrations. And you can see that there's kind of an inverse relationship going on with these values here. So recent performance in the cell has been pretty variable, and it's likely linked to this poor SAV coverage. And some of the hypotheses we have for why SAV hasn't fully recovered in this cell include the accumulation of deep mineral soils, also known as marl soil, and also damage from invasive fish, specifically cichlids. We saw in prior studies that cichlids actually make up the greatest biomass of large fish in the STAs, and they can be really disruptive for SAV health. So for example, in this image here, this is an aerial image that was taken a couple years back in the cell. And all of those dots that you see are nests that have been dug out by fish. More than likely, these are all from invasive fish. So this is quite detrimental to SAV. So what can we do to help fix these issues and facilitate SAV recovery in this cell? Now, we saw in prior studies that a reduction in water level can consolidate soil, and that can help trigger SAV germination. These photos come from a SAV resilience study that was conducted a few years back. And we saw that mesocosms with cell 3 soil that had been dried and rehydrated had significantly higher SAV growth than mesocosms with soil that was just left continuously hydrated. We also know that by reducing water levels, we can concentrate fish into deep water refuges like canals, and this can increase their vulnerability to predation by predators like wading birds or alligators. So we wanted to go ahead and design a study to look at how a reduction in water level or a drawdown can affect different ecological components in cell 3. And I'm just going to give a quick overview of the objectives that we came up with when we designed this study. Starting with our first objective, we wanted to know how does drawdown affect SAV coverage in the cell. So to do this, we used a combination of drone monitoring and also on-the-ground SAV airboat surveys, and the survey points are represented by all of these yellow or pink dots on the map here. Our second objective was to look at how drawdown affects water quality. And so to do this, we collected surface water grab samples throughout the entire cell at sites that are represented by the blue diamonds here. Third, we wanted to look at how drawdown affects soil. So to do this, we measured soil depth at a grid of points throughout the cell represented by the pink dots on the map here. And then we also collected soil cores at a couple locations to further evaluate the chemistry and physical stability of the soil. And those are represented by the red diamonds here. And then our final set of objectives looks at how drawdown affects fish in the cell. And so first we wanted to know, do large fish in cell 3 hinder SAV growth? And so to look into this, we set up some fish exclusion blocks, which are represented by these green rectangles here. And then finally, we wanted to know, okay, if fish do negatively affect SAV in the cell, how will drawdown affect their populations? So to look into this, we set up some electrofishing transects focusing on the outflow canal highlighted in purple here. Okay, and then this is just a quick overview of the timeline that went into this drawdown. So this figure here shows the outflow stage over time for cell 3. And starting in early January 2025, you can see that we closed the inflow gates, left the outflow gates open. We were able to lower the stage a little bit over a foot over the course of a month or so, just by gravity alone. We then went ahead, closed the outflow gate, and at this point we began the process of temporary pump installation. And once we had the temporary pumps up and running in the cell, we were able to get the stage lowered to near ground elevation, which is shown in the photo here. And we held it near ground elevation for approximately another month before eventually turning off the temporary pumps and slowly bringing the stage back up to kind of a more normal operational level. All right, and now I'm going to move into the results that we saw, starting with our first objective. So how did drawdown affect SAV coverage in the cell? So these images are drone images that were taken in the outflow region. This is an area of the cell that prior to the drawdown had really minimal, basically no SAV coverage in this specific area. And you can see that during peak drawdown conditions, there's a really large expanse of exposed soil here. And then 3 months post drawdown in the same area, we see this really, really nice SAV recovery in that area. And these results can be better quantified with our on-the-ground airboat survey data that we collected. So these maps come from our airboat SAV surveys, and they show SAV coverage in the cell pre-drawdown, and then 3 months post-drawdown, and finally 6 months post-drawdown. So in these maps, every single dot represents a location that we surveyed for SAV, and the larger the green circle that's present at that site, the greater the SAV coverage. So from the survey data, we saw that 3 months post-drawdown, SAV was similar, or was present at a similar number of sites as it was pre-drawdown, but the number of high coverage sites did increase. And then we saw that 6 months post drawdown, SAV was actually present at twice as many sites as it was pre drawdown, and the average coverage values had increased. So I think these maps do a really good job at just highlighting the success of the SAV recovery that we've seen so far. Moving on to our second objective, how did drawdown affect water quality? As I mentioned before, we collected surface water grab samples at a number of sites throughout the cell, both before and after the drawdown, and we analyzed them for phosphorus species. So the results from these water quality samples are shown here. You can see the 3 different phosphorus species that make up total phosphorus are shown over time, and I've split it up into the inflow region of the cell, the midflow region, and the outflow region. So from the water quality data, we saw that total phosphorus did increase immediately post drawdown. This was mainly due to an increase in particulate phosphorus, which is shown in light blue here. But then after that, we did see this trend of total phosphorus decline across most of the sites in the subsequent sampling events, with the most recent sampling event actually showing outflow total phosphorus values at 18 micrograms per liter, which is within our QBEL goals, so that was really nice to see. Okay, and our third objective, how did drawdown affect soil and soil consolidation? As I mentioned before, we collected we conducted soil surveys in the cell before and after the drawdown, where we measured the depth of unconsolidated soil. And so the results are shown here. Basically, each bar is the depth of unconsolidated soil over time in the inflow region, midflow region, and outflow region of the cell. We also collected soil cores at a couple sites to further examine the physical stability of the soil. And from all these results, we saw that soil consolidation was greatest in the outflow region of the cell. This made sense because this was the area that had experienced the greatest extent of exposed soil during peak drawdown conditions. We did see that the soil stability did start to decrease a little bit over time, but overall this wasn't really a surprising finding to us. This kind of aligns with the trends that we expected to see based on prior RSSP soil studies that we've conducted. And then finally moving into our last set of objectives, so these are our aquatic fauna related ones. We first wanted to know, do large fish negatively affect SAV in the cell? And so to do this, we set up 12 5 meter by 5 meter netted fish exclusion plots and then 12 open controls. And we went ahead and we arranged these plots into 3 blocks, and we set them up in areas of bare sediment in the outflow region of the cell. So this is an example of one of our blocks, and you can see that there's 4 netted fish exclusion plots here, and then 4 of these totally open controls. So we monitored SAV growth and coverage in these plots for 2 12-week monitoring periods. One period was in the wet season before the drawdown, and then other period was in the wet season after the drawdown. And the reason why we did these 2 monitoring periods is because we wanted to know, first and foremost, okay, will SAV grow in this cell in the absence of fish? And then we wanted to know, all right, well, how will drawdown affect that growth, once again, in the absence of fish? So at the end of both of these monitoring periods, we saw that SAV coverage was significantly higher in the exclosures than it was compared to the controls. So this tells us that large fish do likely inhibit SAV growth in this cell. We also saw that when we're comparing the pre-drawdown exclosures versus the post-drawdown exclosures, that the final SAV coverage was significantly higher in the post-drawdown exclosures. So this figure shows SAV coverage over time in the exclosures, which are represented by the blue lines, versus the open controls, which are represented by the gray lines. And you can see really clearly in this figure that the post-drawdown exclosures had much higher SAV coverage than the pre-drawdown. So this just tells us that SAV coverage is related to some aspect of drawdown, whether that's the soil consolidation, soil exposure to air, or some other factor. It's difficult to pinpoint the exact cause, but we know that it's drawdown related. And that brings us then to our final objective. Now that we know that large fish do hinder SAV growth in the cell, we want to know how their numbers will change over the course of the drawdown. And I mentioned previously that cichlids, namely tilapia, make up the greatest biomass of large fish in the STAs. And so that's why we chose to focus specifically on tilapia for this portion of the study. We also know that their foraging and nesting behavior can be really disruptive to SAV, so we wanted to see if and how their numbers might change over the course of the drawdown. So we went ahead and we focused on the outflow canal for this portion of the study, and we monitored tilapia abundance over time before, during, and after the drawdown. And from these surveys, we saw that tilapia densities didn't actually change during the drawdown. And the main reason why is because tilapia were never truly isolated to the outflow canal like we hoped they would be. Cell 3 has complex topography, more complex, I think, than we anticipated. And so it would have required a lower water level to be able to restrict fish access to other refuges within the cell and truly isolate them in the outflow canal. So ultimately, this portion of the study was kind of inconclusive, but we do think the hypothesis is valid and potentially warrants further consideration, maybe in STA cells that have less complex topography where we could achieve that true closed system that's necessary for this sort of study. All right, so there was a lot of information that I presented here in a pretty short amount of time, so I just wanted to take a couple minutes to kind of tie everything together here. We saw that water quality data coming out of this cell is promising, but I did want to point out that we did have limited operations this past year. There was minimal flow through the cell this past wet season, so we're definitely interested to see how the cell performs this upcoming wet season, hopefully under more of a typical operation schedule. We also saw a really impressive SAV recovery in the cell, and it's likely influenced by multiple mechanisms as part of the drawdown, including soil consolidation, soil exposure to air, and also just that reduction in water flow. And finally, we saw that by removing fish foraging and nesting pressure, we were able to get SAV to establish on bare soil. So even though we didn't see that kind of reduction in tilapia population that we were hoping to see in this study, we do know that drawdown restricts fish access to marsh habitat within the cell's interior, and it can serve as this large-scale method for fish exclusion. So this can help protect SAV and allow it time to germinate and grow in the cell. And thank you everybody for your time today. If you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you to the previous presenters. Now we're going to kind of change gears just a little bit. Our next presenter is going to share with us Southern Everglades, the Southern Everglades Nutrient Source Control Program, and updated. It's Stephanie Neverdusky. Stephanie, it's all yours.
Thank you, Robert. Good morning. Today I will be presenting on an update on the source controls in basins discharging to the Everglades Protection Area. Source control programs include activities or projects to reduce phosphorus before water enters the STAs and water bodies. Examples of these are best management practices, which we call BMPs, of nutrient management, water management, or particulate matter and sediment control. Basins tributary to the Everglades Protection Area include the C-139 and EAA basins, which we call Everglades Construction Project basins. These discharge to STAs before the Everglades Protection Area. And then the non-Everglades Construction Project basins, so non-ECP basins, shown in brown here, are directly discharged to the Everglades Protection Area. The long-term plan and restoration strategies supplement the mandatory source control programs of the 1994 Everglades Forever Act. They aid in providing funds for additional projects and describe comprehensive strategies. The goal of the 2003 long-term plan is to maintain and improve the benefits of source controls by identifying cost-effective opportunities and working in partnership with landowners and municipalities. Today's update will describe the source control program in the EAA and C-139 basins. These have source controls implemented under the regulatory programs of Chapter 40E63, and the other tributary basins which have source controls implemented with a combination of regulatory and cooperative efforts and ultimately rely on the completion of CERT projects. This table provides the water year 2025 overview of the receiving water bodies, runoff total phosphorus loads, and phosphorus flow weighted mean concentrations for each basin. The table sorted from largest to smallest based on the phosphorus load values, and more detail on runoff data is provided in the 2026 South Florida Environmental Report. To start, we have the EAA Basin Source Control Program. It's the largest tributary basin, and its source controls include basin level compliance, permit level compliance, research and demonstration projects, and sub-regional source control projects. The EAA basin level annual compliance results are shown here. The bars represent the estimated annual TP load reduction. The black line represents the 25% TP load reduction requirement. The green line represents the long-term TP load reduction over the 30-year life of the program, which is about 57%. The EAA basin is determined to be out of compliance if the 25% phosphorus load reduction target is not met for 3 consecutive years. Compliance has been met during the life of the program, and a reduction of 62% was for water year 2025. The EAA also has permit level compliance. The permit level compliance is done with works of the district's permits. These include comprehensive BMP plans, which include nutrient management, water management, and particulate matter and sediment control BMPs, a permittee water quality monitoring plan, and post-permit compliance activities. The Everglades Forever Act requires a comprehensive program of research, field testing, and implementation of BMPs. A 5-year EAA Environmental Protection District Master Research Permit was renewed in September of 2025. Research to evaluate the phosphorus discharge differences between EAA farm basins with similar BMPs is what the research permit is for. The hypothesis states that phosphorus in drainage water is higher with certain prior land uses, deeper soils with properties that do not promote phosphorus retention. So 3 pairs, a total of 6 farms were selected for this program. In the EAA basin, a sub-regional source control projects are created to supplement the existing regulatory BMP program. The intent is to reduce phosphorus discharges from areas within the eastern flow path, primarily S5A subbasin. Currently, 2 sub-regional source control projects are under consideration. Next, we have the C-139 basin, which is required to implement regulatory source control programs and maintain phosphorus load at or below the pre-BMP historical level. Although the permit level monitoring is not required for C-139 basin, the district has established a sub-basin monitoring network for the basin. The sub-basin and upstream monitoring sites are shown on the map. C-139 basin level annual compliance results are shown here. The bars represent the measured phosphorus load, the yellow diamond represents the target phosphorus load, and the red diamond represents the limit phosphorus load. Basin level compliance compares measured phosphorus load with target phosphorus load and the limit phosphorus load. If the bar is below the target, it's in compliance. If the bar is above the target for 3 consecutive years, it's out of compliance. And if the bar is above the limit in any given single year, the basin's out of compliance. So the basin has been in compliance since water year 2010. In 2025, or water year 2025, the target was in compliance with a phosphorus load of 54 tons. Next, we have the C51 West and Acme Basin. C51 West Basin is bisected by the C51 Canal. South of the C51 Canal is the village of Wellington's Acme Water Control District, including Acme Basin A, Acme Basin B, and the Pine Tree Water Control District. Historically, Acme Basin A and Acme Basin B discharged to Water Conservation Area 1. Acme Basin B had a SERP project completed in 2007 where the stormwater runoff from Acme Basin B diverted to Acme Basin A, then the C51 Canal. So now C51 Canal flows west to STA 1 East for water treatment. Source control program here includes BMP programs through ERPs issued to the Village of Wellington, upstream water quality monitoring program required by ERPs, and you can see the water quality monitoring network within the Village of Wellington is indicated by the blue U markers. So left we have the historical phosphorus loading with the blue bars and the phosphorus concentrations, the diamonds, discharged from the Acme Basin to the refuge water conservation area 1 before the SERP diversion project in 2007. And then there you can see on the right there were no discharges to the water conservation area 1 after 2007 except for a small load in 2013 when Village of Wellington went under emergency flood conditions associated with Tropical Storm Isaac. So just to reiterate, after the diversion project completed in 2007, stormwater runoff from Acme Basin B is diverted to Acme Basin A and ultimately discharged into C51 Canal. You can see in water year 2025, 9 tons of phosphorus load discharged to STA 1 East. Next, we have the Feeder Canal Basin. The Feeder Canal Basin is an agricultural basin in Hendry County. It includes the North Feeder Subbasin, West Feeder Subbasin, and Seminole Tribe. The North Feeder Subbasin has district oversight of BMP implementation and water quality monitoring required by ERPs, with a goal of achieving phosphorus concentrations no higher than 50 parts per billion. This goal was established by landowner agreement and incorporated into the ERPs. It also has 2 FAV floating aquatic vegetation tilling FDEX projects in the North Feeder Subbasin. In the West Feeder Subbasin, nearly all the landowners are enrolled in FDEX BMP program, and it has ERP. The landowners have ERPs as required. The Feeder Canal Basin relies on the completion of SERP for achieving long-term plan goals. The WERP project is also in this area, the Western Everglades Restoration Project. The goals are to improve the quantity, quality, timing, and distribution of water in the Western Everglades in an effort to reestablish ecological connectivity, reduce the severity and frequency of wildfires, and restore low nutrient conditions. As of September 2024, the Chief's report was signed, and the project was authorized into the 2024 Water Resources Development Act. So going forward for each of the non-ECP tributary basins, I'll show a similar graph to this with the blue line representing the annual phosphorus load and the blue diamond showing the flow-weighted mean concentration at the discharge structure. The Feeder Canal Basin here shows a discharge to structure 190, or S190, and for water year 2025, it discharged 22 tons of phosphorus load to the Everglades protection area. Next we have the L28 Basin. It's an agricultural basin located in portions of Broward, Hendry, and Collier counties. It includes 4 landowners: the Seminole Big Cypress Reservation, Miccosukee Tribe of Indians Reservation, and Big Cypress National Preserve make up the south end of the basin, and then the South Florida Water Management District owns the C139 Annex at the north end of the basin. The L28 Basin SERP projects rely on completion of the WERP. Future site of the Feeder Canal Basin STA is in the annex area up here. So there's a future STA planned in there. Other projects include the Sam Jones Abiaki Prairie Restoration Project, which is about It's located in this area, and it's about 60% complete. Another phase of the restoration construction efforts are slated for January 2027. And just for reference, the C139 FEB area was historically part of the L28 basin, but is now taking water from the C139 basin to control flows to STA 56. The L28 basin discharges through the S140 structure, and for water year 2025, it discharged 18 tons of phosphorus load to the Everglades protection area. Next, we have the C11 West Basin in Broward County. It's 70% of the basin is urban area and the rest is agricultural. The basin discharges through pump stations S9 and S9A to the Everglades protection area. The source controls include BMP implementation and water quality monitoring requirements included in ERPs. The ERPs issued to the basin's 3 water control districts including Indian Trace Drainage District, Central Broward Water Control District, and South Broward Drainage District. The ERP conditions include BMP implementation, optimized detention of stormwater runoff, and water quality monitoring. Broward County Water Preserve Area Project, a SERP project consisting of 2 above-ground impoundments and a wetland buffer, is upcoming. It's designed to reduce discharges from the basin while maintaining flood control, and the final design for the C11 impoundment was completed in fiscal year 2024. The C11 West basin discharges through the S9 and S9A structure included about 3 tons of phosphorus load for water year 2025. So next we have the North Springs Improvement District. It's the last tributary basin. It's primarily urban and residential development area located in the northwest portion of Broward County. The North Springs Improvement District discharges directly to Water Conservation Area 2A via the NSID1 structure. Most of the discharge is routed through L36 North, Hillsborough Canal, and then the C14 Canal. Hillsborough and C14 both flow to the east. ERPs for this basin include conditions for BMP implementation, water quality monitoring, and phosphorus load limits for discharges to Water Conservation Area 2A. The long-term plan goal for this basin is to divert all the discharges away from the conservation area by relying on the SERP Hillsborough Site 1 impoundment project. While Phase 1 of the project is complete, Phase 2 remains on hold as it requires additional congressional authorization. So for water year 2025, no discharges to the Everglades protection area were made from the NSID basin. And then in summary, for water year 2025, the phosphorus load reduction in the EA basin was 62%, and the 30-year average phosphorus load reduction for the program is 57%. C139 basin water year 2025, so for the C139 basin water year 2025, it remained in compliance. And then the other tributary basins for water year 2025 use voluntary BMP implementation and progress towards the completion of SERP projects. Progress towards the completion of SERP projects continues in those tributary basins. Continued success of and ongoing improvements to the Southern Everglades Source Control Program rely on verifying BMP implementation, continuing meaningful research, and tracking programs' performance based on water quality data and basin-specific metrics. If you have any questions or comments, please contact me here.
Thank you, Stephanie. Very nice. All right. This next presentation deals with the public use. Right. We have James Harbaugh, who's the recreational project manager at Inland Resources, that will speak.
Good morning. How y'all doing today? I'm a little taller. There we go. Okay, let's get this set up. And you got a pointer already. Perfect. Thank you. All right. My name is James. I'm with the land stewardship section, recreation more specifically. My group is pretty small, but I work with a lot of the other SGA groups. So one of the questions you probably need to ask is, why do we have public use on these STAs? Well, it's part of the statutes with the Everglades Act that there will be recreation unless the recreation is incompatible with the land uses and the recreation goals of the property or the project area. As long as it doesn't interfere, we're going to have recreation on it. And then for Florida Administrative Code 40E7 is how we enforce the rules so that we don't have incompatibilities. So it's there because the writers of the laws thought it was important. Land stewardship is a very important thing for our agency. What type of recreation do we have on the property? It's basically nature-based recreation. A lot of wildlife viewing. We have a lot of bird groups. We have public use areas where there's a shelter with a picnic area. We have hiking and biking. If there's hiking, biking is allowed as well. And then some of our larger groups, more boisterous, if you will. Some of the people who are very, very passionate about the properties are going to be some of the hunters. They have a lot of connection to the STAs. It's a very good opportunity for them. And then we do have a lot of fishermen on the property too. We just saw not too long ago how many fish are in some of these STAs, and where they can access, there is excellent fishing opportunities. Excuse me. Partnerships and some of our user groups. I mentioned a little bit about birding. We got the Audubon, Hendry, Everglades, and Martin. And then we have Florida National Trail. We have a section of the National Trail that goes through the STA and a couple of other properties as well. And then we have some of our sportsmen's groups like the Florida Sportsmen's Conservation Association and United Waterfowlers of Florida. They're some of our biggest components, or our biggest stakeholders and users of the properties. Some nature-based recreation that we have on the property. Wildlife viewing is probably gaining popularity with all of our STAs, including some of the non-ECP to the north. It's gaining a lot of popularity. Henry Glades Audubon has been, better part of 20 years on STA 5-6. The agreement has been going on, and they have, I don't know how many trips a year, but quite a few of them. I want to say better part of 20 trips a year, if not more. Our biologist takes groups out over to STA 1 and some of the other places that they may not necessarily have access to as readily. So everybody's always excited about getting some places a little different and new. STA 2 is one of those places, and every year there's a group of flamingos that frequent the STA, and they it's a bird list, life list for a lot of people. We don't have a whole lot of places in North America where flamingos show up, and that STA 2 is one of them. It's a memory that they create forever. I still remember some of my first birds. I can tell you where I was. It's just, blue-gray gnat catcher. Really, I can tell you where I first time saw one of those. It's one of those memorable things that is ingrained in their memories forever. STA 5-6 is our biggest birding one. We also have a hiking trail for the Florida National Scenic Trail. Goes along the western side of the STA. It's about, I want to say, 8 miles of trail on the STA itself. about 27.5 miles total on district property through the different levees leading up to the Okeechobee levee system through town. So they go through the L1, 2, and 3 levees is what they end up using. There's a boardwalk in STA 5-6, just in this general area here that the birders use. It also doubles as an ADA hunting blind for waterfowl hunting. And then we do have a shelter, again, and we have a trailhead and a shelter at the trailhead. There is non-potable water available for the hikers that pass through, and we did make an accommodation for some overnight camping there as they pass through. Otherwise, they have to do about 60 miles without any places to spend the evening. So that has been some agreements that we came up with them for that. STA 2, I just mentioned that. So yeah, wherever we have hiking availabilities on our properties, we also do make biking available. So you can come out there with a bike and see the STA 2 if you wanted to see the entire area. Some more nature-based recreation is hunting and fishing. FWC oversees the hunting and fishing regulations in public trust. Basically, the game are owned by the public, and the public trusts them to regulate them so that there would be future fishing and hunting opportunities by making daily bag limits, monitoring populations, et cetera, et cetera. Waterfowl hunting is probably the most regulated of all the access into the STAs. The access points are very specific where they go in, and we have it so that they do not go parallel to flow. We heard about short circuits earlier, and if you make a trail going through the STA that goes parallel with the water, eventually a rivulet forms, and then it just becomes bigger and bigger, and there is potential for a short circuit to form from some of these trails that go parallel. So we are very specific where they can go in and the direction they have to go, and we try to give them places that it's the easiest to do, so they have access, so that because there's the most potential for damage coming from there. The gator hunts, alligator hunts, they happen from the levee itself. They use a fishing rod and a snatch hook, so they don't actually enter into the STA cells themselves, but they do all their activities from the levee. Some of the greatest opportunities that we have, some of the unique opportunities, I should say, is we have wounded warrior events that not the university, United Waterfowlers hold every year. It's veterans that have been injured while in battle, and they come out and they find some healing and lifetime memories on the property. This was a veterans hunt this year, an STA 2 held by FWC. Another activity for hunting is the youth hunts, particularly alligator, although there's been some waterfowl hunts in the past, but it seems a special program for that is not necessary because we have a regular waterfowl season and special days set by the federal government for that already. So alligator hunting is generally the specialty hunt that we have in there. The kids get access tags from FWC out of season, and they're targeting smaller gators instead of the big ones, whereas like the wounded warriors are targeting the larger animals. And it's a great experience for them, and this is occurring as we speak now. This weekend is one of the kind of the kickoff for all that, and it goes until end of March on the weekends. Fishing is becoming very popular, particularly in the A1 FEB, and then STA 3-4 has about 23 miles of canals that are accessible outside the project area by boat. And it's a very popular area. I'm surprised how many trailers I see in the parking lot on the weekends. More and more people are doing it. STA 1 East and 1 West have about 6 miles of levee for hiking, and along that hiking area you can also fish, and that has been very popular over at STA 1 East. I've noticed on the weekends when I drive by there, there's a lot of people there. Hello. Next. One of the challenges that I deal with is, again, we got function of the property, and we have a lot of works that are going on the property continuously. And we also have monitoring that's going on the property continuously. This map here kind of goes across for like water quality monitoring. All the STAs have the canals, the outflow canals, where they get the collections for monitoring. I have worked with the groups and basically said, don't hunt in these canals because they could be detrimental. So with that, we make restrictions where they can go. This is one of them. Another restriction we have is access. We give them access Friday through Monday, so that incorporates the weekends. So that gives the field stations the opportunity to work on the properties in areas where there's open to public, so they don't have interference by the public while they're trying to do something on the property. Land stewardship, our biologist, he will post areas where there's tern nesting, like in 1 East. The public use area has a tern nesting area that occasionally is being utilized. We've seen nests on some structures, things like this, basically trying to keep some of the public out of especially the threatened or endangered species or imperiled species. I work very closely with the STA management team, trying to create opportunities with like the Marsh Master, where we mash in a trail. It's not the Marsh Masher, it's the Marsh Master. But we do use it to create trails to direct people where we want them to go, to give them access to some of the open water SAV sails, because it's can be treacherous going, and it's a good cooperation between saltwater management and the public. It's well appreciated. Veg management also helps me out with the boardwalks and things of this nature, trying to keep the vegetation off of that. What am I forgetting here? Construction. I work with the construction teams and the project managers in trying to, and I'll probably get into some of that a little bit later too. Public communication, my slides got switched around a little bit, that's okay. Public communication, this slide is covering. We have a lot more use on the property, so we need to communicate to the public what is going on the property. Vegetation where it's being planted, such as in this picture, is being posted for the waterfowlers so they can stay out. Some of the access areas, like the canals that are not to be accessed by hunters, we're posting up that sign, and then also the boundaries where they're not supposed to be. So we do have education on our website. Here's a link, so know what you know, questions and answers about the STAs. We put this on the FWC website, it links it back towards our website. And we are working to develop more and more information for the public about the STAs and what can be done on the properties and what can't be done on the properties. There's definitely an increase in usage. And then when I was talking about construction, kind of got flip-flop around, but that's fine. Working with the project managers, this year was very detrimental, or not detrimental, very critical for STA 1 West. There were 3 projects going on the property. FPL had a refurbishment of their power lines. There were some generators being replaced over in the expansion area. And then the G253 levee in this area here was basically the water control structures are being replaced. So there's a lot of work going on. And we almost did not have a waterfowl hunt in that STA this year. But then with some creative thinking, what we did is we switched some dates around. What normally would be hunted on a Saturday, we now have hunted on Sundays because the construction companies are not in there on Sundays, so that opened that up for that day. And then where they normally would hunt on a Sunday, we opened it up to Saturday. So we were able to get 2 hunt days out of the week versus normally we have 3, but 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Nobody? Okay. So we were able to do that, but we did have to close the northern portion of the STA 1 West to hiking and biking and fishing because it was a construction zone for access into the 253 and also for FPL and also for everything basically. So that was closed. We posted that this year too. STA 1 East was basically closed completely. There's no waterfowl hunting in that property. But there is alligator hunting on the property, and with the central flowway being refurbished, it's right smack dab in the middle. There was no way of avoiding the construction zones, so we closed that down completely. So working with them closely, we were able to save one, and then we had to close another. And our goal always is to try and find a way if we can. STA 2. For instance, along Highway 27, there's all that dredging going along in the L18, and all we did was just move the access where they normally go into a different gate. That was a simple fix. STA 3-4, there's still some of the same stuff going on in there, and where they're doing some of the research, we avoided hunts so that they weren't disrupting, and not to be another a non-control, so it's a controllable, so we were able to control with that. STA 5 didn't have any types of hunts or any type of construction this year, but I know in the future there's going to be some canal work that's going to affect it, and we'll have to work around it. Regular maintenance, we've been working on replacing the bathrooms at all the STAs. STA 1 East is the last one that we have. It was just recently put in. I didn't have any cool footage of the crane putting it in. But right now, the vault is in. The older style composting toilets, they had outlived their life expectancy and need to be replaced. Though there were high maintenance requirements to those, and we decided that it's probably easier just to have a vault toilet where you just pump it out. It's a concrete building, gets painted once in a while. Less chances of vandalism. And other maintenance considerations. Currently, they are getting ready to put the concrete pad in to connect it so there's ADA access to it, and these are ADA compliant. And then we'll be putting in sod and gravel around it. And then once that's done, then we're going to reseal the entire parking lot. And once the resealing is done, they'll restripe it, so it'll have a nice, new, fresh look to it. The trees recently in all the STAs were lifted. The oak trees were planted and then never been trimmed. I'm trying to implement a maintenance of trimming on them so we have more of a park-like appearance, so that there's more respect for it. It was looking kind of like a bush before instead of a tree. The trees would be healthier and probably more vibrant with all that trimming. We also replaced the border fence to keep traffic out, ATVs and unwanted vehicular. We put in a fence that is easier to maintain. The split rails were nice. They're very aesthetic, but if you break a rail, they're very difficult to replace and hard to find the replacement components now. We can just go buy an 8-foot 2x10 instead of having to search down some other materials. So we try to do more user-friendly things for maintenance. Moving forward, phase involvement. So there's more STAs coming online, and a lot of these started better part of 10 years ago with just a concept. So this whole process from the concept to public use can take 10 years or more, depending upon how long it takes to build, funding, how long it takes for design, implement, then once the building starts. So recreation standards are incorporated in the initial design phase, and then they're built, and then once all the building, once it's near completion, then the infrastructure for recreation, they come back and visit it again and say, hey, is this what we really want? This was 7 years ago. Have things changed? And then we pinpoint exactly what we want for the infrastructure out there. We're always trying to be ADA considerations. And then we have access, where we're going to park and what is the actual use going to be. And these types of things come about at this time. With all the consulting, public input through our rec forum, we are considering the hunting groups, birding groups. Everybody wants into these things before they're done. But once the testing phase is completed, and then the STA is opened through a governing board approval, and then we have regular recreation on the property. And if you want to get involved, we do have public meetings. I mentioned the rec forums several times probably. We have 3 meetings annually. It's the third Monday of March, June, and September. It's online. It's also available in person. And then another way to get involved is with the rule changes FWC has in the springtime. This time of the year right now, you propose your rule changes to FWC, and this is how you get involved with this. If you have a specific want or need on a property, more bird watching, more hunting opportunities, this is how you get your voice heard at these arenas. And that is what I have, and there's my contact information.
Thank you. So we've come through several presentations, and we're going to move quickly into an opportunity to allow for any public comment. What I would suggest for those who are visiting or are participating by Zoom, if you would like to make a public comment, I ask that you raise your hand, *9 if you're on the phone, and we'll acknowledge you. For those in the room who want to make public comment, we had forms, public comment cards, and currently I have one public comment. It's Mr. Smart, who is with Friends of the Everglades. If you like, sir, you can come to the podium right over here to my right. And I'll give you 3 minutes. Yeah. All right. Okay, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Gil Smart. I'm Policy Director for Friends of the Everglades. We were founded in 1969 by Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, and we're based in Stewart. Our organization in the early 2000s filed a successful Clean Water Act litigation that ultimately resulted in the establishment of the Q-Bell. So in a sense, I feel responsible for why you're all here today. As you know, the Q-Bell states that total phosphorus outflows from the STAs may not be above 19 parts per billion in any single year, must be below 13 parts per billion in 3 years out of 5. The trend line in the 2026 water year is encouraging. The trend line of the 2025 water year was not encouraging. So, we're keeping a very, very close eye on this as to what happens if, in fact, the Q-Bell is not met. It's our organization's position that unfortunately, we're not confident that it is going to be met. We believe we're going to need significantly more land south of Lake Okeechobee for STAs and water storage and water treatment. That is a major policy initiative on behalf of our organization. But for the people in this room, I wanted to say thank you for your hard work. Thank you for your innovation. Thank you for your experimentation. It's going to take all hands on deck to meet these water quality standards. And, we have to remember they're not just sort of, free-floating sort of numbers that don't mean anything. This is about the health of the Everglades. So thank you for working hard for that endeavor, and keep it up.
Thank you so much. All right. I will ask if there are any public comments from online viewers.
Well, Mr. Moderator, at this time there are none, but just as a quick reminder for those people that are online, if you push *9, we will notice your hand raised and give you an opportunity.
And I think, without the response, and I think we're good for today. I think we're good for this meeting. I appreciate everybody coming out, and I look forward to seeing you all again in about a year. Thanks so much, everybody.